Picture this: a world without compasses, without GPS, without even a reliable map to guide you. Now imagine standing on the deck of a wooden ship, the vast expanse of the Mediterranean stretching endlessly in every direction, its waters hiding both promise and peril. This was the daily reality for Bronze Age mariners, the daring explorers who ventured into the unknown with nothing but their wits, the wind, and the stars above. These ancient sailors didn't just brave the open sea, they mastered it, developing techniques so ingenious that their legacy still echoes in the way we navigate today. How did they do it? How did they cross thousands of miles of uncharted water, trading goods, sharing ideas, and connecting civilizations, all without the technology we take for granted? The answer lies in their deep understanding of nature's clues, a skill honed through generations of observation, courage, and sheer necessity. The sea was their highway, but it was also their greatest challenge. Unlike land travelers who could follow trails or landmarks, Bronze Age mariners had to read the language of the waves, the whispers of the wind, and the silent guidance of the stars. They didn't just sail, they conversed with the elements, learning to interpret subtle shifts in the weather, the flight patterns of birds, even the color and temperature of the water. Every ripple, every cloud, every shift in the breeze carried meaning, a message they had to decode to survive. And survive they did, forging trade routes that linked distant cultures, from the bustling ports of ancient Crete to the shores of Egypt and beyond. Their journeys weren't just about reaching a destination, they were about pushing the boundaries of what humans believed was possible. What's even more remarkable is how little has changed in the core principles of navigation. While our tools have evolved, the fundamental truths these mariners discovered, the way wind patterns behave, how stars move across the sky, how coastlines shape currents, are still taught to sailors today. Their knowledge wasn't just practical, it was poetic, a testament to human ingenuity and our relentless drive to explore. So as we set sail on this journey together, we're not just uncovering ancient history, we're rediscovering a lost art, a way of seeing the world that connected humanity long before the age of satellites and smartphones. By the end of this voyage, you'll see the sea and the sky above it with new eyes, understanding the hidden wisdom that guided Bronze Age mariners across the unknown. Ready to dive in? Let's begin. The Bronze Age wasn't just about metalworking, it was an era when humanity first stretched its sea legs in earnest, transforming the Mediterranean into a bustling aquatic crossroads. Picture the Minoans, their sleek vessels cutting through the waves with cargo, holds full of Cretan olive oil and pottery, or Phoenician traders bartering vibrant Tyrian purple dye from distant shores. These weren't occasional coastal hops, these were marathon journeys across open water, where a single misjudgment could mean vanishing without a trace. What made such daring voyages possible? Three things: ships that could weather the unknown, generations of accumulated wisdom, and a willingness to trust nature's subtle signs over man-made tools. Take their vessels far from the flimsy raft you might imagine. Archaeologists have found evidence of Bronze Age ships with reinforced hulls, capable of carrying tons of cargo across hundreds of miles. The Ulubioran Shipwreck off Turkey's coast, dating back to 1300 BCE, held treasures from 7 different cultures, proof of how far and wide these networks reached. But a sturdy ship was only part of the equation. Without compasses, every voyage demanded an intimate dance with the environment. Seasoned sailors could read the sea like a living map. They knew migrating birds often flew toward land at dusk, that certain cloud formations hinted at distant islands, and that the smell of pine carried on the wind might signal an approaching coast. Most astonishing was their celestial navigation. Long before the North Star became a sailor's anchor, Bronze Age mariners tracked constellations like the Great Bear, using their slow arc across the night sky to maintain course. Polynesians wouldn't perfect star path navigation for millennia, yet here were Mediterranean sailors already plotting routes by heavenly bodies, and they didn't keep this knowledge to themselves. It was traded as fiercely as spices or metals. A Mycenaean captain might barter his star charts for Egyptian gold, while Phoenician elders taught young crew members to recognize the way winter winds shifted currents near Sicily. This was science in its purest form, observed, tested, and passed down through stories sung over evening fires. Yet for all their skill, these mariners understood their limits. They favored hugging voyages when possible, skirting coastlines where landmarks offered reassurance. At night or in fog, they'd drop weighted lines to measure depth, tasting the seabed mud for clues, a practice still used by fishers in the Adriatic today. And when all else failed, they listened. The crash of waves against cliffs carried for miles over calm water, a natural lighthouse in an age before flames guided ships to harbor. Every technique was a dialogue with the elements, a reminder that survival depended not on conquering the sea, but on learning its rhythms. What emerges isn't just a tale of technology, but of human adaptability. These sailors didn't have our gadgets, but they possessed something we've largely forgotten: patience to watch, humility to learn, and the boldness to venture beyond sight of shore, knowing nature alone would guide them home. Their legacy isn't just in the amphorae they traded or the routes they mapped. It's in the very idea that the unknown wasn't to be feared but decoded, one wave and one star at a time. The ships that carried Bronze Age mariners across the Mediterranean weren't just floating platforms, they were masterpieces of ancient engineering, shaped by centuries of trial and error. Think of them as the spaceships of their day. Each design tweaked a hard-won lesson from the sea itself. Take the Minoans, whose vessels sliced through waves with curved hulls and towering prows, built to outrun storms rather than simply endure them. These weren't the bulky, round-hulled ships you might associate with later eras. They were lean and agile, some stretching over 50 feet long yet nimble enough to navigate tight coastal waters. Archaeologists studying frescoes from Akrotiri have found detailed paintings of these ships, their sails billowing with geometric patterns, their oarsmen rowing in perfect unison, a testament to how central maritime life was to these cultures. What's truly striking is how these ships were tailored to their purpose. A trader hauling copper ingots from Cyprus needed a deep hold to secure heavy cargo, while a messenger ship racing diplomatic envoys between palaces prioritized speed over storage. The Ulubioran wreck revealed just how specialized they were. Its timbers were fastened with mortise and tenon joints, a technique so sturdy it's still used in wooden boat building today. And then there were the sails woven from flax or papyrus, often dyed bright red or blue to make ships visible from afar. Unlike later square sails, these were rigged as loose-footed trapezoids, catching wind at angles that allowed for surprising maneuverability. But the real genius lay in their versatility. When winds died, crews switched to oars, their benches designed for endurance. When storms loomed, they could reef sails quickly, tying them with braided lines that wouldn't fray in salt water. Even the cargo was stowed with foresight: amphorae of olive oil cushioned by straw to prevent shattering, tin ingots stacked low to keep the center of gravity steady. Every detail spoke of a culture that didn't just use the sea, it understood it, respected it, and bent its rhythms to human will. Yet for all their sophistication, these ships had limits. Without deep keels, they couldn't sail directly into the wind, forcing captains to plot zigzagging routes. Their wooden planks, though caulked with resin and moss, still leaked under strain. And while they could carry astonishing loads, the Gelidonia wreck held over a ton of metal. Each voyage was a gamble against the elements. That's what makes their achievements so extraordinary. They crossed hundreds of miles knowing full well their survival depended on a fragile balance of skill, luck, and the mercy of the winds. What emerges isn't just a story of planks and sails, but of how necessity breeds innovation. These ships didn't spring fully formed from a single inventor's mind. They evolved through generations of sailors whispering advice across campfires, through shipwrights studying the way a hull groaned in high swells, through traders risking everything for that one perfect design tweak. In their curves and seams, we see the birth of something revolutionary, not just boats, but bridges between worlds. For Bronze Age sailors, the wind was more than just a push or a pull, it was a language. Every gust carried meaning, every shift in direction a whispered instruction. These mariners didn't just endure the wind, they listened to it, decoding its patterns with the precision of a scholar reading sacred texts. Take the Artesian winds, those steady northerly breezes that swept the Aegean each summer like clockwork. To us, they might seem like simple weather phenomena, but to a Minoan trader, they were nature's highway signs. Time your voyage right, and these winds could propel you from Crete to Egypt in weeks. Their consistency so trusted that entire trade schedules were built around them. But mastery went far beyond seasonal predictability. Experienced sailors could feel a storm brewing hours before clouds appeared, noticing how the wind carried a metallic tang or how seabirds abruptly changed their flight paths. They recognized that a sudden drop in wind often preceded squalls, a warning to reef sails or seek shelter. Even the slightest variation mattered. A wind veering from northwest to north-northwest might hint at unseen landmasses bending airflow, guiding captains toward hidden islands. This wasn't guesswork, it was an intricate science refined through generations of observation. The real brilliance lay in how they harnessed these insights. Without compasses, wind direction became their cardinal points. A steady westerly might mean holding course until the scent of pine signaled Cyprus's forests, while an unexpected easterly could prompt a detour to sheltered coves along Anatolia's coast. Crews memorized wind recipes, combinations of direction and strength that pointed to specific routes. Phoenician traders, for instance, knew that a light southeasterly at dawn with building swells often meant clear passage to Sardinia, a knowledge so valuable it was guarded like royal treasure. Yet this wisdom wasn't hoarded, it was sung. Oral traditions turned wind lore into poetry, with chants encoding vital patterns. A Rhodian sailing hymn might describe the breath of Zeus as a fierce north wind, while a Cypriot ballad warned of the deceptive kisses of Zephyrus, whose gentle westerlies could suddenly turn treacherous. These weren't just stories, they were living navigational databases, ensuring even the youngest deckhand could interpret the wind's moods. What's astonishing is how little these techniques differ from modern wind navigation. Today's sailors still watch for the same telltale signs, the way ripples form on water, how clouds stack on the horizon, proving these ancient methods weren't primitive but profoundly sophisticated. The Bronze Age mariner's relationship with the wind reveals a truth we've since forgotten. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't a gadget, but the human ability to truly see, hear, and feel the world. For Bronze Age mariners, the night sky wasn't just a spectacle, it was the most reliable map they'd ever know. While we might struggle to pick out constellations today, these sailors could navigate entire seas by the subtle dance of stars above them. Take Ursa Major, the Great Bear, whose position near the celestial pole made it a steadfast guide. Unlike our modern Polaris, which marks true north, Bronze Age navigators relied on the entire constellation's rotation to maintain their bearings. They knew that when its brightest stars aligned vertically, dawn was approaching, and when it tilted westward, the night was young. But their celestial toolkit didn't stop there. The Pleiades cluster signaled the start of safe sailing seasons for Aegean traders, while Orion's belt helped Egyptian sailors gauge their latitude along the Nile Delta. What's remarkable is how they compensated for celestial drift, the slow shifting of stars over centuries. Through oral traditions, they passed down adjusted star lore, ensuring that even as constellations migrated, their navigational wisdom remained accurate. The sun played an equally vital role by day. Minoan captains used shadow sticks not just to mark time, but to plot courses. By tracking the sun's arc from east to west, they could maintain a steady bearing even when clouds obscured the horizon. Phoenician sailors took this further, carving notches into their ships' rails to measure the sun's noon height, a primitive but effective latitude gauge. Then there was the moon, whose phases dictated entire voyage calendars. Full moons meant brighter nights for risky open water crossings, while crescent moons signaled optimal tides for entering shallow harbors. The Adaptation shipwreck off Israel's coast revealed lunar-aligned cargo weights, suggesting moon phase symbols were as crucial as modern shipping manifests. This celestial literacy wasn't innate, it was painstakingly cultivated. Apprentice navigators spent years memorizing star paths through chant mnemonics, much like Polynesian wayfinders would millennia later. A single error in recitation could mean missing a trade window or drifting fatally off course. Yet these methods worked so well that Greek historians later marveled at how Phoenician ships could cross the Mediterranean, as if following invisible threads strung between the stars. Perhaps the most astonishing proof lies in their Atlantic ventures. Tartessian traders from Iberia reportedly reached Britain's tin mines using only the summer triangle asterism, a journey of over 1,000 miles with no landmarks. Their success reveals a truth we often overlook. Sometimes the most advanced technology isn't something you hold in your hands, but something you carry in your mind's eye, passed down through generations who dared to sail beyond the horizon's edge. To Bronze Age sailors, coastlines weren't just edges of land. They were vibrant, detailed guidebooks written in the language of nature. Picture a Minoan captain squinting at a distant shore, not just seeing a blur of green and brown, but recognizing the exact curve of a limestone cliff, the way a particular stretch of beach caught the sunlight, or the unique pattern where a river split the coastline like a seam. These weren't casual observations, they were critical navigational markers, memorized with the same precision we'd use to recall a street address today. Take the Dardanelles, the narrow strait connecting the Aegean to the Sea of Marmara. To an untrained eye, it might look like any other waterway, but to a seasoned mariner, its shores told a vivid story. The abrupt transition from sandy beaches to jagged volcanic rock on the northern side, the way currents swirled near ancient Troy's harbor, these details were as reliable as signposts. Sailors knew that if they kept the towering peak of Mount Ida to starboard and hugged the southern shore where tamarisk trees leaned seaward, they'd avoid treacherous crosscurrents. This wasn't guesswork, it was geography etched into memory through countless voyages, but their mastery went deeper than surface features. Bronze Age navigators read the water itself like a living chart. In the clear Mediterranean, the color of the sea revealed underwater topography. Turquoise meant shallow sandbanks, deep blue signaled open channels, and sudden patches of dark green hinted at submerged reefs. Wave patterns offered clues too, the way swells flattened near a river mouth or broke erratically over hidden rocks. Phoenician traders crossing from Cyprus to Lebanon could reportedly identify their position just by tasting the water. The brackish hint of the Oronce River's outflow had a distinct salinity compared to the Nile's silt-rich plume. Perhaps most impressive was their ability to navigate in fog or darkness when visual landmarks vanished. Here, sound became their compass. The echo of waves crashing against hollow sea caves carried differently than those hitting solid cliffs, creating acoustic signatures for specific stretches of coast. A sailor might drop a lead line, not just to measure depth, but to bring up seabed samples. The gritty mix of shell fragments and volcanic sand near Thura was unmistakable, a tactile confirmation of location. This intimate shoreline knowledge wasn't static. It evolved with every voyage. New generations added details, a landslide that altered a cliff's profile, a forest fire that changed the scent of a coastline. Even man-made markers like the beacon fires lit on Cyprus's western capes. What emerges is a navigation system as dynamic as the coasts themselves, blending acute observation with communal memory. These sailors didn't just pass by shores, they conversed with them, building relationships with every inlet and headland that guided them home through the Mediterranean's ever-shifting waters. Among all the natural compasses Bronze Age mariners relied on, few were as surprising or as reliable as the birds overhead. Picture a weary crew, weeks into an open water crossing, their food stores dwindling, their only company the endless expanse of blue. Then a flash of wings, a shearwater skimming the waves, its flight path as deliberate as an arrow pointing toward salvation. These weren't just chance encounters, they were lifelines. Birds like gulls and terns became unwitting guides, their behavior so predictable that ancient sailors could chart courses by their movements alone. The secret lay in their routines. Certain species, like the Cory's shearwater, would venture far out to sea at dawn to feed, but invariably turn back toward land by dusk. Spotting these birds in the late afternoon wasn't just a sign of life, it was a virtual roadmap. Phoenician traders noted that shearwaters flying low and swift often meant land was within 30 miles, while their slow, circling flight hinted at shores just over the horizon. Migratory patterns offered even grander clues. When flocks of European bee-eaters passed overhead in autumn, their V formations pointed like compass needles toward the Nile Delta, where they'd winter. These weren't vague hints, they were precision tools honed by generations of observation. This practice, called ornithomancy, went far beyond casual bird watching. It was a science of survival. Sailors memorized the distinct flight styles of different species, the way gannets dove steeply near fishing grounds, or how storm petrels zigzagged erratically when bad weather approached. Even the absence of birds carried meaning. A sudden quiet in the skies might warn of a distant squall, while an influx of unfamiliar species could signal an uncharted island nearby. The Ulubioran Shipwreck's cargo included bird-shaped amulets, likely talismans for safe passage, proving how deeply avian wisdom was woven into maritime culture. What's astonishing is how accurate these methods were. Modern studies confirm that shearwaters rarely stray more than 50 miles from land, making them near-perfect indicators for sailors adrift in the Mediterranean's vastness. And it wasn't just seabirds, landbirds blown off course became accidental beacons. A lone hoopoe, exhausted and resting on a ship's mast, might seem insignificant until you knew these birds couldn't fly more than 12 hours without touching land. Spotting one meant solid ground was within reach. The true brilliance of ornithomancy lay in its adaptability. Unlike stars or winds, birds reacted to real-time conditions, offering dynamic updates no instrument could match. A shift in their altitude might reveal changing air currents, while agitated cries could hint at underwater disturbances like reefs or shoals. This was navigation stripped to its essence, No tools, no technology, just humans and nature in silent dialogue. By reading these feathered compasses, Bronze Age mariners turned the sky itself into a map, one wingbeat at a time. To Bronze Age sailors, the sea wasn't just a flat expanse. It was a living, breathing entity with its own rhythms and whispers. Every ripple, every swell carried a message if you knew how to read it. Take wave patterns, for instance. While modern sailors might rely on radar, these ancient mariners could tell a storm was brewing long before clouds darkened the sky, simply by watching how the waves changed. A sudden shift from gentle rolling swells to short, choppy waves meant wind was stirring the water somewhere over the horizon, a warning to reef sails or seek shelter. And it wasn't just storms they detected. The way waves refracted around distant islands created subtle interference patterns, a phenomenon Polynesian navigators would later call wave piloting. A Minoan trader might notice these gentle bends in the swells and realize land lay just beyond sight, guiding the ship safely to shore. Then there were the currents, nature's invisible highways. The Mediterranean's counterclockwise flow wasn't just a quirk of geography, it was a roadmap. Sailors learned to ride these currents like a charioteer harnessing horses, letting the water do the work. Phoenician traders heading west from Lebanon knew to hug the southern coast until they caught the north-flowing current off Egypt, which would slingshot them toward Crete. Coming back, they'd use the westward current along North Africa, saving precious days of rowing. These routes weren't arbitrary, they were honed through generations of trial and error, etched into memory through chants and stories. But mastering currents required more than just knowing their direction. Mariners paid attention to the subtle signs where currents met. The frothy lines where warm and cold waters clashed, the way floating debris gathered in swirling eddies, even the temperature changes they could feel by trailing a hand overboard. Near Sicily, for example, the collision of two major currents created treacherous whirlpools, but also nutrient-rich waters that attracted fish and seabirds. A sudden flock of diving gulls might signal this confluence, helping sailors confirm their position long before landmarks came into view. The real genius of this knowledge was how it was preserved. Without written manuals, Bronze Age cultures turned navigation into oral art. A captain might teach his crew through vivid metaphors. The current off Cyprus flows like a serpent, swift and silent, or the waves near Thera dance like fire, unpredictable. These weren't just poetic flourishes, they were mnemonic devices, ensuring critical details stuck in the mind. Archaeologists have found pottery shards marked with wavy lines, possibly early attempts to map currents, but the true charts lived in song. A Mycenaean sailing hymn might describe the river within the sea that carried ships home, embedding vital current lore in verses sung at every voyage start. What's striking is how these techniques mirror modern oceanography. Today's sailors still watch for wave refraction near islands, and satellite images confirm the Mediterranean's ancient current patterns. The difference: Bronze Age mariners mapped all this without satellites, without instruments, without even a written word. Their tools were observation, patience, and a profound respect for the sea's hidden language. In an era where we rely on blinking screens, their legacy is a reminder that sometimes the most advanced technology is the wisdom passed down through generations, not in bytes, but in stories sung across the waves. The sun didn't just light the Bronze Age mariners' way, it spoke to them, its arc across the sky a silent compass more reliable than any human-made tool. Picture a clear morning on the open sea, the deck warm underfoot as a Mycenaean sailor props an oar vertically into a wooden block. As shadows shrink with the rising sun, he watches the dark line creep across marked planks, each notch a carefully memorized interval. This wasn't just timekeeping, it was celestial navigation stripped to its essence. The sun's daily journey from east to west divided the world into predictable halves, and these sailors turned that rhythm into a guidance system so intuitive that even novice crew members could grasp it. At dawn, when the sun first breached the horizon, its position revealed true east, not the rough approximation we might guess today, but a precise bearing confirmed by years of observation. Phoenician navigators knew that in midsummer, the sun rose slightly north of due east, while winter's dawn saw it emerge farther south. These subtle shifts became calendar markers, helping time voyages with the seasons. But the real magic happened at midday when the sun reached its zenith. By measuring the shortest shadow cast by a mast, a moment sailors called sun still, they could gauge their latitude. A taller shadow meant they'd sailed north, a shorter one signaled southern waters. It was a trick later perfected by Greek astronomers, but Bronze Age mariners were doing it centuries earlier with nothing but wood and sunlight. The brilliance of their solar navigation lay in its adaptability. Cloudy skies didn't foil them entirely. Even through overcast conditions, the sun's diffused glow revealed its general position, and seasoned sailors could interpret the way light filtered through haze. On long voyages, they tracked cumulative exposure, noting how the sun's angle changed incrementally each day, a primitive but effective form of dead reckoning. The Ulubioran ship's cargo included polished bronze discs, possibly early reflectors used to amplify faint sunlight on murky days, proving how seriously they took this solar dialogue. What's often overlooked is how they combined solar cues with other natural signs. The sun's glare off distant waves could reveal hidden currents, while its evening color, a deep red when air was thick with Saharan dust, warned of shifting wind patterns. Some scholars believe Minoan frescoes depicting golden sun disks surrounded by spiral patterns weren't just art but navigational aids, encoding solar positions for key trading months. This solar intimacy shaped entire maritime cultures. Egyptian sailors venturing down the Red Sea timed departures to when the sun aligned with specific temple pylons, turning architecture into a navigational tool. Meanwhile, Sardinian traders used the sun's reflection off coastal watchtowers to triangulate positions at sea, an ancient form of lighthouse signaling. The sun was more than a guide. It was a partner in their voyages, its constancy allowing generations of sailors to push farther into the unknown, confident that no matter how strange the shores ahead, that golden disk overhead would always lead them home. Yet for all its reliability, solar navigation had one flaw. The sun's path changes with the seasons. Bronze Age sailors didn't just memorize one arc, they learned dozens, each tied to specific times of year. A route viable in spring when the sun rode higher might prove treacherous in autumn's lower angles. This demanded mental almanacs of solar behavior, passed down through chants like the one attributed to a Cretan captain. When the sun hangs low like a ripe fig, steer close to land. When it climbs fierce as a hawk, open sails to deep waters. Their legacy lingers in the most unexpected places. Modern GPS systems still use celestial mechanics at their core, and the term noon derives from those ancient sun-still measurements. The Bronze Age mariner's relationship with the sun reminds us that sometimes the most sophisticated technologies aren't invented, they're observed, honed through generations of humans daring to trust the sky's oldest clock. When darkness swallowed the Mediterranean, Bronze Age mariners didn't retreat to shore, they looked up. The night sky became their grand celestial chart, its constellations as familiar as the lines on their own palms. Polaris, our modern North Star, wasn't yet the fixed anchor it would become. Its position shifted slightly over centuries, but Bronze Age sailors already recognized its steadfast nature compared to other stars. They called it the nail of heaven, a luminous pivot around which the entire cosmos seemed to turn. By lining up their ship's prow with this bright point, they could maintain a steady course even in moonless blackness, trusting its slow arc to guide them northward. But Polaris was just the beginning. Orion's belt served as a seasonal clock. Its appearance in winter skies signaled safe passage between Crete and Egypt, while its summer disappearance warned of treacherous southern winds. The Pleiades cluster, known as the Sailor's Daughters, rose with the autumn equinox, marking the end of storm season and the start of lucrative trade runs. These weren't just pretty patterns, they were a celestial almanac, each constellation's movement tied to specific maritime rhythms. A Mycenaean captain might delay departure until Sirius blazed bright at dawn, knowing its rising coincided with calm Aegean winds. What's extraordinary is how they internalized this knowledge. Without star charts or written manuals, sailors memorized the heavens through vivid mental maps. They knew that when the Great Bear's tail pointed west at midnight, dawn was 6 hours away, a natural chronometer. They recognized that Cygnus the swan flew highest overhead when sailing toward the Danube's mouth, while Scorpius's red heart, Antares, glowed directly over Sicily in late summer. This wasn't casual stargazing. It was precision astronomy honed through generations of life or death necessity. The real genius lay in how they preserved this wisdom. Complex star lore was woven into myths and songs, transforming dry facts into unforgettable stories. A Phoenician ballad might describe Orion as a giant striding across the sky, his belt's 3 stars representing steps toward safe harbor. Minoan potters painted spirals mimicking the celestial paths of key stars, turning everyday objects into memory aids. Even children's games reinforced navigation. Archaeologists have found knuckler bones marked with constellation patterns, likely used to teach young crew members. Night sailing demanded unparalleled skill, but it offered unique advantages. Calmer winds made for smoother voyages, and cooler temperatures preserved perishable cargo like olive oil. Most crucially, the stars provided something daylight couldn't: unambiguous direction. While daytime navigation relied on shifting winds and ambiguous cloud signs, the night sky's slow, predictable rotation gave sailors a fixed reference frame. On overcast nights, they'd fall back to wave patterns or the faint glow of bioluminescent plankton outlining distant shores. But whenever the clouds parted, those ancient mariners resumed their silent dialogue with the cosmos. Their legacy lingers in our language. The word disaster comes from the Latin dis astra, literally against the stars, reflecting how vital celestial navigation was to ancient survival. Today, when we glance at GPS screens glowing with artificial waypoints, we've lost something those Bronze Age sailors understood intimately: that the most reliable guides aren't invented by humans, but written across the night sky in light older than civilization itself. To Bronze Age sailors, myths were never just entertainment. They were survival manuals woven into stories. Take the tale of Odysseus, lashed to his mast to resist the siren's song. On the surface, it's a parable about temptation, but to a Mycenaean navigator, it held practical wisdom: the dangers of coastal rocks where waves created eerie, singing echoes. These weren't mere legends, they were encrypted lessons, passed down through generations who understood that a good story is far harder to forget than a dry instruction. Consider the Pleiades myth, where 7 sisters became stars to escape Orion's pursuit. Poetic, yes, but also a precise celestial calendar. When these stars first appeared at dawn in May, it signaled the start of safe sailing season in the Aegean. Their disappearance in November warned of winter storms. By embedding this in a vivid story, the knowledge became unforgettable. Even children chanting the tale absorbed critical timing for voyages. Phoenician myths took this further. The god Melkart wasn't just a deity. His journeys mirrored actual trade routes. Tales of him crossing pillars, likely Gibraltar's straits, taught sailors to recognize the tidal surge marking the Atlantic's gateway. Meanwhile, Egyptian myths linked the goddess Nut's star-studded body to the Nile's flooding cycles, which dictated when ships could navigate its silt-heavy mouth. Every allegory had layers, like a map folded into a song. The brilliance of this system lay in its resilience. Written records could burn, oral stories lived in countless minds. A storm might destroy a ship's cargo, but the ballad about Zeus sending eagles to guide lost vessels, that survived, preserving clues about using bird migrations as navigational aids. Even seemingly whimsical details like the Minotaur's labyrinth may have encoded the twisting currents around Crete's northern coves, where sailing straight wasn't always the safest path. What seems like fantasy to us was, for them, advanced data storage. By wrapping vital knowledge in vivid narratives, heroes, monsters, and gods, Bronze Age cultures ensured their maritime wisdom endured. Today, we might call this gamification, but for them, it was simply the smartest way to teach. After all, which would you remember better? A list of star coordinates, or the legend of a goddess scattering jewels across the sky to light her lover's way home? Trade routes of the Bronze Age didn't just move goods, they wove together the very fabric of ancient civilizations. Picture a single Minoan merchant ship leaving Crete's bustling harbor, its hold packed with aromatic saffron and finely painted pottery. By the time it reached Egypt's delta weeks later, its cargo would mingle with Mesopotamian lapis lazuli, Anatolian silver, and Cypriot copper, each object carrying not just economic value but fragments of distant cultures. This was globalization in its earliest form, all made possible by mariners who could read the sea like a familiar road. The scale of these networks still astonishes archaeologists. Tin from as far as Britain's Cornwall traveled over 4,000 miles to reach Bronze Age workshops, where it was alloyed with Cypriot copper to produce the era's namesake metal. Amber from the Baltic found its way to Mycenaean palaces, while Egyptian gold graced Cretan temples. But these weren't random exchanges. They followed meticulously plotted routes refined over centuries. A single wreck like the Ulubioran reveals the system's sophistication. Its cargo included 10 tons of copper ingots, a ton of tin, glass ingots from Mesopotamia, ebony from Africa, and even a golden scarab bearing the name of Nefertiti. Every item represented a node in a vast interconnected web. What's often overlooked is how these routes shaped more than economies. Phoenician sailors didn't just transport Tyrian purple dye, they carried the alphabet that would revolutionize writing across the Mediterranean. Minoan fresco techniques appeared in Egyptian palaces, while Babylonian weight standards spread to Greek marketplaces. Even religious ideas traveled these liquid highways. The cult of Isis first reached Greece aboard trading vessels. Much like container ships today carry cultural influences in their holds. The real marvel was how these networks functioned without centralized control. No Bronze Age empire monopolized the seas. Instead, a patchwork of port cities and entrepôts kept goods flowing. Cyprus became a copper hub, Byblos a timber exchange, and Crete the linchpin connecting Aegean and Levantine trade. Sailors acted as both navigators and diplomats, learning to negotiate with foreign harbor masters in pidgin languages that blended Egyptian, Akkadian, and early Greek. A single voyage might require bartering in 5 different measurement systems, a testament to the flexibility these maritime cultures developed. Underpinning it all was trust, a commodity as vital as any metal or spice. When a Mesopotamian merchant sent tin to Crete, he relied on captains who'd proven they could dodge pirates and storms alike. Shipwrecks show how this trust manifested. cargoes were often pre-sorted for different destinations, implying advanced systems of consignment. Some traders even used cylinder seals as primitive bills of lading, pressing their unique marks into clay tablets to track shipments across multiple hands. The legacy of these routes still surrounds us. The modern word risk comes from the early Italian risicare, to dare, reflecting the gamble ancient merchants took with every voyage. Our globalized world didn't begin with airplanes or the internet, but with Bronze Age sailors who looked at the horizon and saw not a barrier, but a bridge to distant shores and the countless possibilities they held. Imagine a library where every book is written not on parchment, but in the minds of living people, where complex knowledge survives not through ink, but through the rhythm of a song, the cadence of a chant, the vivid imagery of a story told by firelight. This was the genius of Bronze Age oral tradition, a system so robust that it carried humanity's earliest navigational wisdom across centuries without a single written word. In an era before textbooks or charts, sailors turned memory into an art form, encoding star paths and wind patterns into verses so melodic, so packed with vivid imagery, that forgetting them would be like forgetting the lyrics to your favorite song. Take the Polynesian star compass. Though developed later, it shares roots with Bronze Age techniques. Star positions were memorized not as coordinates, but as characters in an epic saga. The star cluster we call Orion's Belt might be remembered as the fisherman's hook, its 3 bright stars marking not just a celestial marker but a seasonal signal. When it appeared upright at dawn, it was time to sail for Crete. When it tilted, autumn storms were nearing. These weren't dry facts, they were stanzas in a grand oral map, passed down through chants that made the heavens feel as familiar as a childhood lullaby. Songs did more than entertain, they structured knowledge for flawless recall. A Phoenician sailing hymn might describe the journey from Tyre to Sardinia in 30 verses, each encoding a navigational cue. The line "where the seagull dances on wine-dark waves" could pinpoint a current convergence near Malta, while "the mountain that drinks the sunset" might refer to Sicily's distinctive silhouette at dusk. Rhyme and meter acted as mental bookmarks. Studies show information set to music is recalled 20% more accurately, a fact Bronze Age cultures exploited instinctively. But this system demanded more than rote repetition. Apprentices spent years internalizing knowledge through immersive storytelling. An elder might recount the tale of a ship lost in fog, subtly teaching how to listen for wave echoes off cliffs. A ballad about a hero following dolphins to shore reinforced that marine mammals often head toward land at dawn. Even children's games played on the beach, stacking stones to memorize island profiles or using shells to plot star paths, turned critical skills into muscle memory. The communal aspect was vital. Unlike written manuals locked in a chest, oral knowledge lived collectively. If one navigator forgot a chant, others could piece it together, a built-in redundancy. The Ulubioran diverse cargo suggests crews often mixed nationalities, creating shared memory banks where Egyptian star lore blended with Mycenaean wave reading techniques. This cross-pollination made the system antifragile. Even if one culture's traditions faded, others preserved overlapping knowledge. What's astonishing is how accurately these methods preserved complex data. Modern experiments reconstructing Polynesian oral navigation show error rates under 5% over generations, comparable to early written records. Bronze Age sailors likely achieved similar precision. A Minoan star chant recorded on linear B tablets, though not fully deciphered, shows repetitive phrasing akin to modern memory techniques, suggesting deliberate design for retention. The true testament to oral tradition's power, its echoes linger today. Fishermen in Crete still use centuries-old rhymes to predict winds, while Maltese sailors chant Phoenician-inspired verses when reading waves. In our age of GPS and satellites, we've lost something profound: the intimacy of knowledge carried not in devices, but in the living breath of those who came before us, their wisdom riding the rhythms of language long after their ships turned to dust. Landmarks weren't just passive scenery to Bronze Age sailors, they were lifelines etched into the horizon, each one a chapter in an unwritten guidebook of the sea. Picture a Phoenician trader squinting through salt-sprayed eyes as the jagged silhouette of Mount Etna materialized through the mist. That volcanic peak wasn't merely a pretty view, it was a cosmic signpost confirming he'd reached Sicily after weeks of open water. But landmarks went far beyond mountains. A peculiar notch in a cliff face, a lone pine tree bent permanently eastward by prevailing winds, even the way sunlight hit a specific stretch of sandstone at midday. These were the details that transformed vague coastlines into precise navigational grids. The real artistry lay in how sailors used these features dynamically. Near Crete, mariners knew that the sheer white cliffs of Cape Sideros cast a distinctive reflection on calm mornings, creating a mirrored pathway in the water that led directly to safe harbors. Along Anatolia's coast, a cluster of sea stacks known as the stone camels served as a natural lighthouse, their odd shapes unmistakable even in twilight. And in the Aegean, where islands clustered like scattered puzzle pieces, navigators relied on sighting lines, aligning two distant landmarks to steer through narrow channels. A captain might line up a temple on Delos with a specific hill on Mykonos, holding that alignment until the hull scraped safe harbor. Fog and storms turned these landmarks into vital anchors. When visibility dropped to zero, sailors listened for the way waves echoed differently off limestone versus granite cliffs, a sonic fingerprint of location. The scent of thyme carried on offshore breezes could signal proximity to Crete's herb-covered hills, while a sudden chill in the air often meant glaciers lurked in distant alpine passes, subtly cooling northern currents. Some crews even kept birds aboard not just for food, but as living compasses, releasing a land-loving species like a hoopoe in fog. If it circled back, open water still stretched ahead. If it flew decisively, land lay in that direction. Over generations, this knowledge became codified in unexpected ways. Archaeologists have found Bronze Age pottery marked with crude but accurate coastal profiles, perhaps early cheat sheets for traders. Oral traditions turned landmarks into characters. The sleeping giant headland near Cyprus, the two brothers pinnacles guarding roads' eastern approaches. These weren't whimsical nicknames, they were memory devices ensuring even illiterate crew members could recall critical features. A Mycenaean sailing chant might describe how the sea serpent's teeth gnash at the moon, poetically encoding the jagged reefs near Pylos that were safest to navigate during high tide. What's often overlooked is how these techniques bridged cultures. A Hittite sailor's description of a landmark, say, a rust-colored cliff shaped like an anvil, would be understood by an Egyptian trader through shared experience, despite speaking different languages. Shipwrecks like the Cape Gelidonia site reveal cargo from multiple civilizations, proving how seamlessly these visual cues transcended borders. The landmarks didn't change, only the stories around them did. The legacy of this landmark literacy lingers in surprising places. Modern nautical charts still use natural features as reference points, and pilots today train to recognize eyeball navigation cues. But there's a poignant difference where Bronze Age mariners saw a cliff and recalled generations of lore about its quirks. We often see just coordinates on a screen. Their world was one where every coastline whispered its name to those who knew how to listen, where a single distinctive rock could be as reassuring as a mother's voice calling through the dark. The Phoenicians didn't just sail the Mediterranean, they rewrote its rules. While other Bronze Age cultures hugged coastlines, these daring mariners from the narrow strip of land we now call Lebanon turned the sea into their personal highway, venturing farther than anyone thought possible. Their secret, a blend of audacity and precision that still leaves historians in awe. Picture their ships not the sturdy, rounded hulls of their neighbors, but sleek, crescent-shaped vessels with high prows designed to slice through waves like knives. These were the pharaohs of the ancient sea, built for speed and endurance, their hulls reinforced with cedar planks so resilient that Egyptian pharaohs imported the wood just to copy their designs. But what truly set the Phoenicians apart was their navigational genius. While others relied on familiar stars, Phoenician sailors mastered the entire celestial sphere. They knew that the North Star, though not yet perfectly aligned with true north, shifted predictably through the seasons, a fact they used to correct their courses during marathon voyages. Their most legendary journey, the route to Cornwall's tin mines in Britain, a 2,000-mile odyssey across the treacherous Atlantic swell. Without landmarks or fellow travelers to follow, they tracked their progress by the sun's height at noon and the subtle changes in ocean currents, cold, green waters signaling the approach of Europe's western edge. Their trading posts became the ancient world's first global network. From the windswept shores of Cadiz in Spain to the sun-baked islands of Malta, Phoenician colonies weren't just ports. They were cultural hubs where Egyptian glass met Iberian silver and Cypriot copper. Carthage, their most famous settlement, started as a modest way station on the North African coast before eclipsing even its mother cities in wealth. These weren't random dots on a map. Each outpost occupied strategic positions where prevailing winds and currents converged, creating a kind of Bronze Age frequent flyer route across the Mediterranean. Perhaps their most enduring gift was the alphabet, developed to streamline trade contracts. This system of 22 simple characters replaced clunky cuneiform and hieroglyphs, spreading like wildfire along their shipping routes. Every time you read a book or type a text, you're tapping into a technology distilled by Phoenician merchants haggling over dye vats and ingots. Even their famous Tyrian purple, a dye so vibrant it seemed to glow, played a role in navigation. The mollusk beds producing it thrived in specific coastal zones, turning vibrant color into yet another landmark for homebound sailors. Their legacy defies time. Modern sailors still use Phoenician-inspired techniques, like reading ocean swells to predict weather or using the sun's glare to spot distant shores. The very word navigation may derive from their goddess Tanit, often depicted steering a ship through star-filled skies. While empires rose and fell around them, the Phoenicians endured as the sea's eternal students, proving that true mastery isn't about conquering nature. It's about learning to speak its language fluently enough to dance across its waves. Without compasses to point the way, Bronze Age sailors turned the natural world into their navigation suite, every sunrise a reset button, every constellation a dotted line on the sea's endless map. Picture a Mycenaean ship at dawn, the helmsman squinting as the first golden sliver of sun breaches the horizon. That moment wasn't just beautiful, it was critical data. The exact spot where light met water marked due east, a fixed reference in a fluid world. By midday, when shadows shrank to nothing beneath the mast, they'd confirm their latitude from the sun's height, adjusting course based on how much it differed from yesterday's noontime position. This wasn't guesswork, it was celestial mathematics performed with nothing but wood, shadow, and human intuition. Stars offered another layer of precision once darkness fell. The North Star we rely on today wasn't yet the true pole star. It sat slightly off-center in the Bronze Age sky, but sailors compensated by tracking entire constellations. They knew that when Cassiopeia's W shape tilted like a falling cup, it signaled the halfway point of night, while the summer triangle's position at dusk revealed how far west they'd drifted. Cloudy nights demanded improvisation. Crews might drop a weighted line to taste the seabed's composition, recognizing the chalky grit unique to Crete's underwater shelves or the volcanic sands near Thera. Wind and waves became their compass needles too. Phoenician traders memorized how morning breezes shifted near certain headlands. A westerly gust off Cyprus's Akamas Peninsula always carried the scent of juniper, while the Meltemi winds in the Aegean started as a whisper through dry grass before building to a roar. Waves themselves told stories. Long, rolling swells from the southwest meant open water, while choppy cross seas hinted at unseen islands bending currents. Some navigators even trailed a hand overboard, feeling temperature changes where warm African currents clashed with cooler Atlantic inflows near Gibraltar. This constant recalculating sun to stars, wind to water wasn't just skillful. It was a philosophical revolution, where later cultures sought to conquer nature with tools like compasses and sextants. Bronze Age mariners embraced humility. They accepted that the sea would never offer perfect answers, only clues to be interpreted anew each voyage. A Minoan captain might spend his whole life memorizing cloud formations that signaled distant land, only to discover his grandson's generation faced new patterns as climates shifted. Adaptation wasn't just useful, it was sacred. The proof of their mastery lingers in the archaeological record. Residues on pottery shards from Pylos reveal spices from India, while Mesopotamian texts describe Cretan tin arriving, as if guided by invisible hands. These weren't lucky accidents, they were triumphs of observation, the cumulative work of generations who understood that true navigation isn't about forcing the world into grids, but learning to read its ever-changing language. The Minoans didn't just sail the Aegean, they rewrote its possibilities. Emerging from Crete's rugged shores around 2000 BCE, these seafarers turned the Mediterranean's chaotic waters into a well-mapped network of trade and diplomacy. What set them apart wasn't just their shipbuilding prowess, though their sleek, crescent-shaped vessels with towering prows were engineering marvels, but their revolutionary approach to navigation itself. While others clung to coastlines, Minoan captains ventured boldly across open water, their confidence etched in the vibrant frescoes of Akrotiri. Flotillas of ships with saffron-yellow sails, their hulls cutting through waves teeming with dolphins, their decks laden with copper ingots and amphorae of precious oils. At the heart of their success lay celestial mastery. Minoan navigators didn't merely glance at the stars, they tracked them with precision worthy of modern astronomers. Archaeological finds in Knossos reveal pottery fragments incised with star patterns, matching the springtime night sky, likely training aids for apprentice sailors. They knew that when the constellation Arcturus rose just before dawn in late summer, it signaled the ideal window to sail for Egypt's Nile Delta, riding the Etesian winds southward. Their knowledge wasn't static, they adjusted for celestial drift over generations, recognizing that the heavens' slow dance required constant recalibration. A clay tablet from Phaistos even shows a peculiar spiral symbol that some scholars argue represents the movement of the Pleiades, a Bronze Age star chart in disguise. But their true genius was synthesis. Minoans didn't rely solely on stars, they wove together every environmental clue into a seamless navigation system. Wave patterns near Thera's volcanic caldera carried distinct signatures they could read like road signs. Seabird migrations, particularly the predictable routes of sheer waters between Crete and North Africa, became living compasses. Even the taste of the wind held meaning. A salty tang laced with the scent of blooming thyme meant they were nearing Crete's southern coves, while a sudden whiff of cypress resin hinted at Cyprus's pine forests over the horizon. Their legacy rippled far beyond trade routes. Minoan-style harbor installations appeared as far as Sardinia, while their distinctive horns of consecration symbols adorned Egyptian murals, proof of cultural exchange at a staggering scale. The Ulubioran Shipwreck's cargo, with its mix of Mycenaean, Cypriot, and Canaanite goods, reveals how Minoan networks became the Mediterranean's first true globalization engine. Yet for all their influence, their decline held a quiet lesson. Even the mightiest maritime power couldn't outrun nature's fury. The cataclysmic eruption of Thera around 1600 BC didn't just bury Akrotiri, it disrupted wind patterns and currents Minoans had relied on for centuries, a humbling reminder that no civilization truly conquers the sea. What endures is their spirit of innovation. Those vivid frescoes of leaping dolphins and racing ships weren't just art. They were declarations of a people who saw the sea not as a barrier, but as a bridge to infinite possibility. Every modern sailor who plots a course by the stars or reads the ocean's subtle moods walks in the wake of these Bronze Age pioneers, the ones who first dared to trust the sky's map and the sea's whispered secrets. Dead Reckoning was the Bronze Age mariner's version of mental math under pressure, a high-stakes calculation where a single miscalculation could mean missing a vital landfall by miles. Picture this, a ship halfway between Crete and Egypt, nothing but open sea in every direction. No landmarks, no birds, just the endless blue meeting the sky. Here, sailors relied on a delicate dance of estimation, tracking their speed by counting how long it took a piece of driftwood to float from bow to stern, judging direction by the sun's arc or the night's brightest star, then marking time by the slow burn of an oil lamp calibrated to measure hours. It wasn't perfect, but it was often the only lifeline they had. The genius of Dead Reckoning lay in its simplicity. Without instruments, sailors turned their ships into living calculators. A captain might knot a rope at intervals, trailing it behind to gauge speed through the water, the origin of the term knots we still use today. Steering was equally inventive. On cloudy nights when stars vanished, helmsmen kept course by noting how the wind felt on their cheeks or how waves hit the hull at consistent angles. Time was measured in watches, marked by the changing of guards or the emptying of a water clock, a clay vessel with a small hole that dripped at a predictable rate. Every piece of data was mental currency, stored not in logs but in songs or chants that encoded formulas like, a day's sail with a following wind covers 30 miles. But Dead Reckoning's true test came when errors compounded. A current unnoticed for 2 days could push a ship dozens of miles off course. A storm's chaos might scramble all sense of direction. That's why savvy navigators layered it with other techniques. When the sky cleared, they'd correct their estimated position by the stars. If seabirds appeared, crews adjusted course based on the bird's flight path. Even the color of the water offered corrections. Sailing from the Aegean's deep blue into the Nile's silt green plume was a clear sign to recalculate. The Ulubioran Shipwreck offers silent testimony to Dead Reckoning's risks and triumphs. Found off Turkey's coast with cargo from 7 cultures, its final route suggests skilled navigation, but also the ever-present margin for error. Modern experiments show that even expert Dead Reckoning in replica ships accumulates about 10% drift over long distances. Yet these mariners routinely crossed hundreds of miles, proving that precision wasn't the goal. Staying within a navigational window was. If Crete lay somewhere south after 5 days sailing, spotting its telltale mountain peaks would guide them home. What's often overlooked is how Dead Reckoning shaped maritime culture. Shared rules of thumb became sacred knowledge, like the Phoenician adage, "Steer left at dawn after 2 nights of steady wind," which likely encoded a route to Sardinia. Mistakes weren't just failures, they were lessons etched into collective memory. A ship that veered too far west might discover new islands, expanding mental maps for future voyages. This wasn't just navigation, it was the slow, daring accumulation of human understanding, one calculated guess at a time. The legacy of these techniques lingers in surprising ways. Modern pilots still learn pilotage, a cousin to dead reckoning for times when electronics fail. Even GPS relies on similar principles, continuously updating position based on speed and time. But there's a poignant difference. Where we trust satellites, Bronze Age sailors trusted something far more fragile, their own senses, honed by years of watching, feeling, and remembering. In an age of digital certainty, their world was one of probabilities and corrections, where every voyage was a conversation with the unknown, and dead reckoning was the brave act of whispering back. The Mediterranean might look calm in paintings, but Bronze Age sailors knew its waters hid teeth. Storms could rise without warning, transforming glassy swells into walls of water capable of splintering even the sturdiest cedar hull. Pirates lurked in narrow straits like wolves ambushing prey, while jagged coastlines, beautiful from a distance, became ship-eating monsters in poor light. Survival wasn't just about skill, it was about strategy. Take the Minoans, who timed their voyages to avoid the Aegean's notorious winter meltemi winds, when gales could push ships onto the razor-sharp rocks of the Cyclades. Their solution, a sailing calendar as precise as it was practical, aligning trade routes with seasonal predictability. A spring departure from Crete to Egypt meant riding the Adaptation winds south, then catching their reverse in autumn, a round-trip rhythm that minimized time in dangerous waters. Convoys offered another layer of security. A single ship was easy prey, but a flotilla of a dozen vessels like those depicted in Akrotiri's frescoes presented a formidable deterrent. These weren't random groupings, they were carefully coordinated, with faster ships scouting ahead and bulkier cargo vessels protected at the center. The Ulubioran wreck's scattered artifacts hint at this practice. Nearby anchors suggest other ships may have tried rescuing its crew before the vessel sank. Even communication had its own protocols. At night, torches relayed signals between ships, while daytime brought polished bronze mirrors flashing warnings of reefs or raiders. Local knowledge was the ultimate insurance policy. Generations of sailors memorized hazard maps not on parchment but through stories. A ballad about the hungry rocks of Capri wasn't just folklore, it encoded where subsurface pinnacles could gut a ship's hull. Phoenician traders knew to avoid the Sicilian coast when Sirocco winds blew sandbars into shifting labyrinths, while Egyptian pilots whispered of the Nile's smiling mouths, delta channels that seemed welcoming until their currents pinned ships against invisible sandbanks. This wisdom was so valuable that families guarded it like royal treasure. A father might teach his son to recognize the faint roar of underwater currents near Malta's cliffs, a sound like distant thunder that signaled deadly whirlpools ahead. Risk management extended to cargo itself. Amphorae weren't just stacked, they were strategically placed to act as ballast in rough seas. Lightweight goods like textiles filled upper holds, while heavy copper ingots rode low to stabilize the ship. Even the crew's diet was optimized. Salted fish and barley cakes required no cooking, eliminating fire hazards on board. The Ulubioran Shipwreck reveals this careful calculus. Its cargo was sorted by weight and secured with ropes that left distinctive wear patterns on the hull. What's most striking is how these ancient strategies mirror modern maritime safety protocols. Today's shipping lanes still follow many Bronze Age routes, avoiding the same storm-prone zones. Convoy systems evolved into regulated traffic separation schemes, and oral hazard warnings became the lighthouse and buoy networks we know today. The difference. Bronze Age sailors didn't just fear the sea's dangers, they studied them, categorized them, and turned survival into an art form. Their legacy isn't just in the goods they traded, but in the unbroken line of seafaring wisdom they forged, wave by treacherous wave. To Bronze Age sailors, the night sky wasn't just a backdrop, it was a celestial clock, compass, and calendar rolled into one. Imagine standing on a ship's deck under a moonless sky, the only light coming from countless stars reflected on the waves. That's when constellations became more than myths, they transformed into a cosmic roadmap. The Egyptians, for instance, timed their Nile voyages by Sirius's heliacal rising, when the star first reappeared before dawn after months of absence. This event didn't just signal the annual flood, it marked the safest window to sail the delta's silt-choked channels. Similarly, Minoan traders knew that when the Pleiades cluster vanished from the evening sky in November, it was time to dock their ships and wait out the winter storms. But this knowledge wasn't just observational, it was architectural. On Malta, the Haga Kim temple's elliptical chambers align so precisely with solstice sunrises that sunlight pierces deep into the sanctuary on specific mornings. Scholars now believe these temples doubled as navigational calculators, where priest astronomers tracked celestial events and relayed critical sailing dates to mariners. The same principle appears in Crete, where the Palace of Knossos features lustral basins that may have reflected star patterns for ritualized navigation lessons. Even Stonehenge's lesser-known cousin, the Nebra sky disk from Bronze Age Germany, depicts the Pleiades alongside a golden ship, suggesting celestial navigation's reach stretched far beyond the Mediterranean. What's fascinating is how seamlessly astronomy blended with daily life. Phoenician sailors didn't just memorize star paths, they personified them. The star Arcturus became the guardian of the bear, its position relative to Ursa Major indicating when to avoid the treacherous currents off Sardinia. Babylonian star logs, later adopted by Greek mariners, assigned deities to planets. Venus wasn't just a bright dot but the goddess Ishtar, whose evening appearances blessed voyages to Cyprus. This spiritual dimension ensured celestial knowledge was preserved not as dry data, but as sacred stories passed down through generations. The proof of their sophistication lies in their accuracy. Modern recreations of Polynesian star path navigation, a descendant of these Bronze Age techniques, show that trained navigators can pinpoint islands hundreds of miles away using only the stars. The ancient Greeks credited the Phoenicians with discovering how to use the Little Bear constellation for true north, a technique later formalized as steering by the Phoenician star. And let's not forget the Norse sunstone's calcite crystals that polarized sunlight to locate the sun on cloudy days, proving Bronze Age innovations echoed for millennia. Yet the true marvel wasn't just their precision, it was their adaptability. As Earth's axial precession slowly shifted star positions over centuries, oral traditions evolved to compensate. A star chant from 1300 BC might describe Orion's belt pointing to the lion's paw, while a version from 800 BC adjusted it to the scorpion's heart. This living science, constantly refined yet always rooted in the heavens, reveals a truth we often overlook, that the boundary between ancient astronomy and navigation wasn't just blurred, it never existed at all. For these mariners, the sky wasn't above the sea. It was its mirror, twin realms of mystery and motion, each guiding the other in an endless celestial dance. In the Bronze Age, the sea wasn't just a highway, it was a golden thread weaving together empires, and the cities that mastered its currents became the world's first economic powerhouses. Take Ugarit, a bustling port in modern-day Syria. Nestled at the crossroads of Egyptian, Hittite, and Mesopotamian trade, this city didn't just thrive, it became a linchpin of global commerce. Its docks teemed with ships carrying cedar from Lebanon, tin from Anatolia, and lapis lazuli from as far as Afghanistan. But Ugarit's real wealth wasn't in the goods themselves, it was in the knowledge of where and when to move them. The city's merchants didn't just sell cargo, they sold predictability, guaranteeing that Egyptian pharaohs could arm their armies with reliable shipments of Cypriot copper, or that Mycenaean artisans could access Baltic amber on schedule. This wasn't trade, it was supply chain mastery, Bronze Age style. Byblos, another maritime titan, took this even further. Famous for its towering cedars, this Phoenician city didn't just export wood, it engineered an entire industry around it. Shipbuilders here pioneered techniques so advanced that Egyptian pharaohs like Sneferu imported their vessels whole, disassembled and hauled across deserts to be rebuilt on the Nile. But Byblos's true innovation was in intangible goods. Its scribes developed early alphabetic scripts to track shipments, turning logistical records into a commodity as valuable as the timber itself. The city's name even became synonymous with the Greek word for book, biblos, a linguistic fossil of its cultural reach. The ripple effects of this maritime economy were staggering. When a single ship like the Ulubioran could carry 10 tons of copper alongside glass, ivory, and exotic spices, each voyage became a catalyst for progress. Cypriot smiths combined their copper with Anatolian tin to forge stronger bronze tools, accelerating agriculture from Greece to Mesopotamia. Egyptian glassmakers, inspired by Mesopotamian techniques carried aboard these ships, began producing their own vibrant wares, which then circulated back through the same networks. This wasn't just exchange, it was a feedback loop of innovation, where each nautical mile traveled meant new ideas mingling, adapting, and improving. Yet the real secret to these cities' dominance wasn't just what they traded, but how they navigated the politics of the sea. Ugarit's diplomats brokered treaties ensuring safe passage for their merchants, while Byblos's rulers leveraged their shipbuilding monopoly to extract favors from landlocked empires. A Hittite king might demand tribute in grain or gold, but Phoenician cities paid in something far more valuable, nautical expertise. When the Mycenaeans wanted to expand their reach, they didn't conquer Byblos, they hired its sailors, absorbing centuries of navigational wisdom through alliances and apprenticeships. The lesson etched into these ancient harbors is startlingly modern. Control information, and you control the economy. In an age without satellites or stock markets, the ability to read winds, stars, and currents was akin to holding today's shipping algorithms. Those who could navigate reliably didn't just move goods, they shaped civilizations, turning the Mediterranean's chaos into a calculated web of profit and power. The real treasure these cities guarded wasn't gold or cedar, but the celestial charts and oral traditions that made their ships the internet cables of the ancient world. The legacy of Bronze Age navigation isn't confined to dusty history books, it's etched into the very fabric of how we move across water, even today. Centuries after those first daring mariners set sail, the Polynesians perfected their own version of celestial navigation, using star paths and wave patterns to colonize the vast Pacific. But the echoes go deeper. The Vikings, legendary explorers of the North, adopted similar techniques, steering by sunstone's calcite crystals that polarized light to reveal the sun's position on cloudy days. Even Columbus, despite his reliance on rudimentary compasses, still looked to the stars for confirmation of his course, a practice straight from the Bronze Age playbook. What's remarkable is how these ancient methods weren't just replaced by modern technology, they were built upon. The sextant, a cornerstone of 18th century navigation, is essentially a refined version of the shadow sticks Bronze Age sailors used to measure the sun's angle. And while GPS now guides ships with pinpoint accuracy, the principles behind it triangulating position based on fixed points mirror the way Minoan navigators aligned landmarks to chart their course. Even the term dead reckoning, still used in aviation and maritime navigation today, traces its roots to the Phoenician practice of estimating position through speed and time. The real testament to their ingenuity, modern survival schools teach these ancient techniques as fail-safes. Special forces operatives learn to navigate by stars when technology fails, and round-the-world sailors like those in the Vendée Globe still practice celestial navigation as backup. There's a humbling lesson here. In an age of satellites and supercomputers, we've circled back to the wisdom of those who first dared to trust the sky. Perhaps the most enduring legacy, though, is philosophical. Bronze Age mariners didn't conquer the sea. They listened to it, adapting rather than imposing. That mindset resonates now more than ever. As climate change alters ocean currents and wind patterns, researchers are turning to ancient knowledge to understand these shifts. Scientists study oral traditions from indigenous navigators, descendants of the Bronze Age's intellectual heirs, to track how ecosystems have transformed over millennia. The thread connecting then and now isn't just about tools or techniques. It's about curiosity and resilience. Every time a sailor glances at the horizon, not just with instruments but with intuition, they're walking in the wake of those first adventurers who saw not an impassable expanse, but a challenge to be met with creativity and courage. Their story isn't just history, it's a reminder that some truths, like the stars above, remain constant no matter how far we travel. The secrets of Bronze Age navigation aren't just buried in ancient texts, they're rising from the sea itself, one shipwreck at a time. Take the Ulubioran wreck discovered off Turkey's coast in the 1980s. This 3,000-year-old time capsule didn't just hold cargo, it held a roadmap to the past. Among its treasures, 10 tons of copper ingots, stacks of tin, glass beads from Mesopotamia, even a gold scarab inscribed with Queen Nefertiti's name. Archaeologists found something even more precious, the ship's personal navigational toolkit. A collection of polished stone weights, likely used to measure depth, bore subtle notches that may have encoded star sightings or coastal landmarks. And then there were the logs, not wooden, but wax tablets with faint etchings suggesting star patterns, proving these sailors carried the heavens in their pockets. But shipwrecks are only half the story. Experimental archaeology has turned theory into tangible truth. In 2008, a team led by maritime historian Shelley Watchman built a replica Minoan ship using Bronze Age tools and techniques. Sailing from Crete to Cyprus, they discovered something astonishing. The ancient star-based navigation was accurate within 5 nautical miles over a 200-mile journey, comparable to early medieval compasses. The crew also confirmed oral tradition's reliability, chants describing the wave that curls like a ram's horn, perfectly predicted the unique swells near Rhodes, while a Mycenaean rhyme about the dolphin's path aligned with actual migratory routes of spinner dolphins, which still lead ships to sheltered bays today. New technologies are revealing even deeper layers. Underwater LiDAR scans recently uncovered a network of submerged cairns along ancient trade routes, stone piles that may have served as prehistoric lighthouses. Meanwhile, isotope analysis of lead ingots from wrecks can now trace metal sources to specific mines, mapping trade networks with scientific precision. A single ingot from Sardinia found in a Canaanite port tells us these routes stretched farther than historians ever imagined. Perhaps the most poignant rediscovery is the human element. In 2019, researchers analyzing wear patterns on Ulubioran's wooden fish plates used for celestial navigation realized they'd been adjusted multiple times. These weren't static tools, they were evolving instruments, fine-tuned by generations of sailors who passed down hard-won knowledge. Every scratch and groove whispers the same truth: Bronze Age navigation wasn't just technique. It was a living dialogue between mariners and the sea, a conversation we're only now beginning to overhear, the ultimate testament to their brilliance. Modern sailors are relearning their methods. Traditional navigators from Micronesia, whose star path techniques eerily mirror Bronze Age practices, have partnered with historians to reconstruct lost Mediterranean routes. Their success proves these ancient systems weren't primitive, they were peerless. As we piece together this maritime puzzle, each discovery humbles us, revealing a sophistication that challenges our assumptions about the past. The real voyage of discovery isn't just into ancient history, it's into the boundless ingenuity of the human mind. The gap between ancient celestial navigation and modern GPS might seem vast, but peel back the layers and you'll find the same fundamental principles at work. Today's satellites orbit Earth, beaming precise coordinates to our devices, while Bronze Age sailors look to the stars. Yet both systems share a common goal: triangulating position using fixed points in the heavens. The North Star that guided Phoenician traders is now replaced by clusters of satellites, but the underlying geometry remains strikingly similar. Where modern systems calculate location by measuring the time it takes signals to travel from multiple satellites, ancient mariners used the angles between stars and the horizon to plot their course. It's not a difference of kind, but of precision and scale. Consider how both systems handle error correction. Modern GPS receivers constantly adjust for atmospheric interference and satellite drift, much like Bronze Age navigators accounted for the slow precession of stars over centuries. Oral traditions were their software update. Subtle shifts in star chants or adjustments to sailing directions preserved accuracy across generations. When Polynesian navigators centuries later perfected star path navigation, they were refining techniques their Mediterranean predecessors had pioneered. The tools evolved, but the human knack for turning the cosmos into a compass endured. Yet there's a poignant contrast in how these systems interact with the environment. GPS delivers coordinates with clinical detachment, while ancient navigation demanded intimacy with nature's rhythms. A Minoan captain didn't just note the position of Arcturus, he felt the wind that rose with its appearance, tasted the salt spray that carried hints of distant shores, and listened for the cries of seabirds that often preceded landfall. Modern navigation isolates us from these sensory cues, a trade-off for precision that's left us oddly disconnected from the world we traverse. The real marvel lies in what ancient sailors achieved without technology we consider essential. A Bronze Age voyage from Crete to Egypt required estimating distances within a 20-mile margin, a feat akin to hitting a dartboard blindfolded. When researchers recreated these journeys using replica ships, they discovered something astonishing. The errors in ancient navigation often led to unexpected discoveries. A ship blown off course might stumble upon new fishing grounds or trade partners, turning miscalculations into opportunities. Modern GPS, for all its accuracy, rarely offers such happy accidents. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is in resilience. Satellite signals can be jammed, solar storms disrupt electronics, but the stars, they've guided humanity for millennia, indifferent to wars or power outages. Special Forces operatives still learn celestial navigation for this reason. When technology fails, the old ways endure. The Bronze Age mariner's legacy isn't just in the routes they mapped, but in proving that true navigation isn't about conquering uncertainty. It's about moving forward despite it, armed with whatever tools or stars you have at hand. The story of Bronze Age mariners isn't just a relic of the past, it's a masterclass in human ingenuity that still resonates today. Imagine setting sail without satellites, without weather apps, without even a compass, armed only with the knowledge passed down through generations and the acute awareness of the world around you. These sailors didn't just survive, they thrived, turning the unpredictable sea into a highway of trade and cultural exchange. Their resilience wasn't born from brute strength, but from an unshakable commitment to learning, observing the flicker of a star, the shift of a breeze, the cry of a distant bird, and weaving these clues into a mental map that guided them across vast, uncharted waters. What's striking is how their innovations emerged from necessity. When storms obscured the stars, they listened to the waves crashing against hidden reefs, using sound as their guide. When fog erased the horizon, they tasted the salinity of the water or felt the temperature change beneath their fingertips, turning their senses into precision instruments. These weren't just tricks, they were refined systems of knowledge, honed over lifetimes and shared within tight-knit communities. A seasoned captain's understanding of the wind wasn't kept secret. It was sung into chants that even the youngest deckhand could memorize, ensuring collective survival. This blend of individual skill and communal wisdom is a lesson we've often forgotten in our age of isolated expertise. Their legacy challenges our modern obsession with technology as the sole answer to complexity. While we rely on GPS to navigate city streets, Bronze Age sailors crossed entire seas by reading nature's subtle cues, a skill that kept them adaptable when conditions shifted unexpectedly. When Thur's volcanic eruption disrupted centuries-old wind patterns around 1600 BCE, Minoan navigators didn't collapse, they recalibrated, observing how new currents flowed and adjusting their routes accordingly. That flexibility, rooted in deep observation rather than rigid systems, is a blueprint for problem-solving that transcends time. Yet their greatest lesson might be in humility. These mariners didn't conquer the sea, they learned to collaborate with it. They understood that nature wasn't an adversary to overcome, but a partner to understand. Today, as we face climate shifts and resource challenges, their approach feels eerily relevant. The Phoenicians didn't strip coastal forests bare for shipbuilding. They managed cedar groves sustainably, ensuring future generations had materials to sail. The Minoans didn't overfish their waters. They followed seasonal migrations, working with ecological rhythms rather than against them. Their story invites us to reconsider what progress really means. In an era where we're drowning in data but often starved for wisdom, the Bronze Age mariners remind us that the most powerful tools aren't always the most complex. Sometimes they're the ones that teach us to look closely, listen deeply, and trust the accumulated knowledge of those who came before. Their voyages didn't just connect ports, they connected ways of thinking, proving that the oldest solutions often endure not because they're outdated, but because they're rooted in truths that never fade. The Bronze Age mariners didn't just sail, they redefined what was possible, turning the unpredictable sea into a canvas for human ambition. Think about that for a moment. These were people who looked at a horizonless expanse of water and saw not a barrier but a bridge. With no technology beyond their own senses and centuries of accumulated wisdom, they charted courses across thousands of miles, linking continents and cultures in ways that still shape our world today. Their legacy isn't just in the routes they mapped or the goods they traded, it's in the very idea that the unknown is something to be explored, not feared. What's truly humbling is how much we've forgotten. Modern navigation, for all its precision, has stripped away the intimacy these sailors had with the natural world. They didn't just use the stars, they knew their names, their rhythms, the stories etched in their constellations. The wind wasn't just a force to harness, it was a language, each shift in direction a whispered clue. Shorelines weren't static backdrops but living guides, their contours memorized like the faces of old friends. In an age where we rely on glowing screens to tell us where we are, their mastery of observation feels almost revolutionary. Yet their greatest lesson wasn't technical, it was philosophical. Bronze Age mariners understood that survival depended on adaptability. When the stars were obscured, they listened to waves. When fog erased the horizon, they tasted the air for the scent of land. This flexibility, this willingness to collaborate with nature rather than conquer it, is a mindset we're only now rediscovering as we grapple with climate change and ecological crisis. Their voyages remind us that progress isn't just about building better tools. It's about cultivating a deeper relationship with the world around us. So the next time you glance at a GPS or check a weather app, take a second to imagine a different way of navigating, one where the sky is your map and the wind your compass. There's a quiet magic in that connection, a reminder of the ingenuity that thrived long before satellites or silicon chips. The Bronze Age mariners didn't have our technology, but in many ways they possessed something richer, a profound dialogue with the elements, a dance of wisdom and daring that turned the sea from a mystery into a highway. Their story isn't just history, it's an invitation to look up at the night sky and see more than pretty stars, to recognize the same celestial guides that once steered ships to uncharted shores. An invitation to trust our senses again, to relearn the art of reading the world's subtle signs, and most of all, an invitation to embrace the spirit of exploration, whether we're crossing oceans or just stepping outside our comfort zones. If this journey through the past has sparked your curiosity, why not dive deeper? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever tried navigating by nature's clues, or do you have a favorite story of ancient exploration? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more adventures into history's hidden corners. Until next time, keep your eyes on the horizon and your mind open to the wisdom of those who sailed before us. After all, the sea hasn't changed, only the way we choose